Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Onion Soup, the show where we pull back the layers of metaphysics and reality in order to demystify spirituality. And today, I like to welcome back to the show Mr. Chris Earnshaw. How are you doing today?
Morning. Thank you very much. I'm very well. Thank you. Yourself?
Doing pretty well, pretty well. You
Good,
know, I,
good.
I- I'm so excited to have you back on because there's so much to talk about. So, for those who might not have seen the first episode and might not know what you're all about, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your research?
So, my background is I've been in Japan for 40 some years, and at the same time, I was initiated into Freemasonry. So, I've been a Freemason for over 40 years. And then in 2016, I was initiated into a Taoist temple in Taiwan called Ling Yin. And since then, a lot of things have changed. Um, and that's probably what I'd like to talk to you about today.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, let's dive into those changes. What exactly has changed for you?
Well, the first thing is I, having been, I'm a quite experienced Freemason. I immediately recognized the Taoist initiation ceremony as being exactly the same as Freemasonry, not just about like saying Catholic Mass is like a Protestant Mass. It's not, but they're both masses. But in the case of the Taoist initiation, it was exactly the same. And that for me was mind blowing. I've just because we think of Freemasonry as being a quintessential English establishment set up in 1717. And so it's a little bit mysterious because we've never been very good at explaining what we do. And so when I saw that they were the same, I just couldn't wrap my head around how could it be the same. And Taoism goes back some 3,000 years. So, whereas Freemasonry only goes back 300 years. So, obviously, Freemasons learnt their ritual from the Chinese, but I've never heard that talked about anywhere. And so, for me, that was the start of a 7 year adventure looking into all the connections between Freemasonry and China and how it could have happened. And I'm fairly confident I know the answer.
Interesting. So, when you talk about the rituals, one of the things that I really want to dive into today was the secrets of the golden flower. Can
Yes.
you talk about what that is?
So, the secret of the golden flower um, is a it's it's a very mysterious book um, about how to achieve an out of body experience. It doesn't term it like that in the book because they use different terminology in Chinese, but basically that's what it's about. Um, it was made famous because Jung wrote an introduction to it, and so people started to pay attention to it. But the book goes back to the Tang dynasty, which is something like 600 to 900 AD. And it was purportedly written by a Chinese mystic who is now revered as one of the two saints of Taoism, Lu Dongbing. Uh, Lu wrote this originally as a scroll. So in ancient China, there was no publishing industry as such, and everything was written on often pieces of very fine bamboo. and the bamboo was sewn together, and it made a kind of um, hard to say. It's like a scroll, and these scrolls were lent to people who then copied it, and they copied it and passed it around, and that's how these scrolls became uh, let's see, in the public. Well, it's not the public domain, but it was available to philosophers and academics and people in the court. And the book itself wasn't published until 16, in the late 1600s, and that was originally only in Chinese, and then it was translated, I think, in about the 1920s or 1930s, from Chinese to first German, then to English, and then it became famous.
Yeah. Let's talk about the idea of astral projection and taking your spirit out of your body. Let's first talk about what that is and how to talk about it.
Well, I've had 12 experiences where my consciousness has left my body, and 9 of these were accidental. They weren't something I was trying to achieve. 3 of them were through my own efforts, and like, for example, I had some surgery on my nose to remove polyps. It's a fairly common surgery. And I woke up during the surgery, and I saw the doctors talking to each other, and they were making remarks about me. So the next day, when I was back in the ward and the doctor was doing his rounds, I, I s- I reminded him what he told the other doctor in surgery, and he said, "You couldn't have known that," And he went white. I said, he was like it was about to have a heart attack. He said, "How do you know that?" So, well, I heard you say it to the doctor. And so I was, totally anesthetized. There was no way I could wake up during surgery, but my consciousness was fully awake, and I heard everything. I saw everything and heard everything. So this is actually quite a common experience. A friend of mine had an accident with a jet ski, and she was knocked unconscious in the water. And she floated above the scene, and she saw the rescue people coming to take her, and the ambulance and everything. And she remembers it quite clearly. But for many people, it's a very frightening experience, and they'd rather not repeat it. They they think they're dying, and because they can see their body, either in an accident or in bed or whatever. They look down and this is me. What happened to me? But for the Chinese, this was the ultimate experience. It proved that humans are immortal, and this is something that is not explained in the Bible. The organized religions, particularly the Abrahamic faiths, ignore it completely. They don't talk about humans' immortality. But the Chinese have known this for some thousands of years, and they wrote down in a book how you can experience it. And they called it wandering in the beginning of time is one experience, out of body experience, or they said, my me has separated from my I. I am and me have separated, but we come back later. So it's I've know quite personally one of the leading uh, ex, experts in this area is William Bullman. Bill Bullman has written several books about out of body experiences, and he writes from a modern perspective. But the Golden Flower um, explains the same thing, but from 3,000 or 2,000 years ago.
Mm. So, what aspects from the golden flower are found in Freemasonry?
So many things. For example, the 3 senior officers in the lodge. There are 3 senior officers, there's a master and 2 wardens, the same in a Chinese temple. There's a master, and he's known as the light transmitting, master, and he has 2 senior officers, and, they represent the sun, the moon, and the universe. Whereas in the Masonic lodges, they represent the worship master, the sun, and the moon. Uh, there's so many other things. So in initiation in Freemasonry, the worshipful master brings the light from the east of the lodge to the candidate, uh, and passes it to him, and that's the beginning of his Masonic career. Well, in Taoist temple, the master is called the light transmitting master, and he does exactly the same thing. That's just 2. I found 26 correspondences between Freemasonry and Taoism. Um, the building, the design of the building, the shape of the building, the clothes we wear, the symbolism, it's all exactly the same. It's
When they talk about transferring of the light, is that I know it's a physical thing when they do it, from a ritualistic perspective, but do you think that could have more to do with Reiki and spiritual energy?
Yes. So, um, some mystics, I'm not sure if they're mystics or psychics, are able to see light being transmitted from the hand of the master to the candidate. They actually see physical light. Most people cannot see it, but it's all based on the master's intention. And so intention is the basis of most spiritual or magic work is based on intention. And so when he puts his hand out to shake the hand of the candidate, and he says, you know, with this transmit the light from the east to you, that's a real thing. And it's the beginning of his spiritual awakening. And then Freemasonry has 3 degrees. Taoism only has the 1 degree, but the 1 degree is packed with all the information that Freemasonry has divided into 3 degrees.
Why do you
And
think Freemasonry divided into 3?
well, because alchemy is based on a 3-step process. And so at the time, um, very little was understood about China. This is Freemasonry was reorganized. It had existed previously as a sort of guild, wasn't an official guild, it was a fraternity, which is slightly different. But it was an organization to protect builders and their rights and help people find work, etc. We just had the Great Fire of London in 1666, and the whole of the east of London had to be rebuilt, which included St Paul's Cathedral and many rich people's houses. And there was a lot of work for masons in those days, and particularly the law had been changed. Previously, London was made from wooden structures, and that was one of the causes of the fires. So the law was changed that only the stone buildings could be built. So therefore, you need lots of masons rather than carpenters. You need stone masons.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I really wanna dive deep into the ideas behind immortality and,
Yes.
what they talk about from a Freemason perspective and also the perspective of the Golden Flower.
Yes, that's a good point. Um, so, from a Freemason's point of view, many things are going on in the ritual, and unfortunately, we have nearly 5 million members worldwide. And of those 5 million, there are very few people that understand the depth of the ritual. It seems very simple. Seems like the story of initiating a brother who comes to help rebuild King Solomon's temple. But it's not a physical temple, it's a temple inside of us where we can meet God and have a personal experience. That's how we explain it. So the ritual is a building up, and you come to the 3rd degree where the mason is what we call perfected. In Chinese, they use the same word, they say perfected. But perfection in China is only one of 5 steps. to a kind of immortality. So, in the third degree in Freemasonry, the wording changes, and in the ritual, the word immortality or everlasting life is something like 6 or 7 times. It's repeated, but very few people pick up on that. You know, third degree is about immortality. I didn't know that, but it's there. It's written, and we repeat it during the rituals. So, one of the things that was going on at the time was politically, England was in a difficult situation. It was a Protestant country, but it was surrounded by Catholics. We have a Catholic France, Catholic Spain, and a Catholic Scotland, and also Catholic Ireland. So, with four sides, we have Catholicism. And the Scottish Catholics wanted to retake the throne of which at the time was King George I, from the Protestants, and put a Catholic king. So King George and his parliament and the government were very worried about conspiracies and plots. There were plots to kill him. There was an assassination attempt. So when you get a lot of educated people meeting in secret, they start to wonder what's going on. What are they up to? So the government introduced two bills in Parliament to make meeting in secret, making it a an offence, and you could be imprisoned for that. They were just trying to keep down basically the Inquisition and Jacobites, which Jacobites are followers of James, Catholics from Scotland. So that's what they were worried about. So the Freemasons, to avoid that, they made the rituals look like what we call a passion play. Um, a passion play was a play that was put on by guilds in the 13 and 1400s in England, um, to remind people of the their patron saint, and how the patron saint looks after them. And then once a year they have this celebration and a play. Well, it kind of got out of hand. It used to be a small event. After a while, it was an event that lasted sometimes 3 or 4 weeks, and everybody was totally drunk, and people forgot. But it was an honor to actually be part of this play. And in Germany, in a place called Oberammergau, they are still doing this passion play since the 1600s. So that's coming on for three and a half 350 years. They only stopped once during the Second World War, I think. So there's a tradition of guilds putting on passion plays. So the Freemasons wanted it to look the same. So the government couldn't shut them down. Said, no, we have a long history of putting on passion plays, and this is what it is. But isn't really a passion play. It's instructions on how to have an out of body experience. But you wouldn't know that. I think it's kind of got lost over the years, and that's the reason I wrote my books.
Hmm, interesting. So I wanna dive a little bit deeper into that, but before we do, we're gonna take a
Sure.
quick word from our sponsors.
That's
Welcome.
very topical advertisement, because your sponsor showed a carpet with a yin yang symbol on it. And that's very important in Chinese, but it's also reflected in Freemasonry. And Masons, again, don't recognize that. But anyway,
Interesting. How is the yin yang recognized in Freemasonry?
well, because yin and yang are uh, black and white. And so we have black and white floors in lodges. And Masons say it's black and white represents good and evil in society. Unfortunately, that is a misunderstanding. It represents positive and negative energy. But over 300 years, the understanding got lost by the Freemasons. But yin and yang represents duality in nature. And of course, in Christianity, we went from duality of the early days of Christianity to a Trinitarian belief, where we have God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. And this brought all sorts of new problems, which I write about. But anyway, that's a different story.
Yeah, when I do talk about the yin yang symbol with people, I try to steer them away from the positive and negative aspects, or good and bad rather, and more
Yes, it's
so the
good and bad. It's
dualistic
positive.
idea.
So negative is important as positive. You need a balance, and so it's in Buddhism. You have to take the central, the balanced road, the center, not too much black and not too much white. But even inside black, you can meet a really negative person, but there's an element of positivity in him, and that's why there's this little dot inside the black um, black part of the yin yang. And again, yin yang isn't a stable thing; it's actually revolving all the time. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So going back to the rituals in Freemasonry that involve immortality, can you describe that ritual a little bit?
Well, I took a an oath not to share secrets, but the ritual, the third part is the most important, and it has an element of the passion play. Um, And this is actually quite interesting because it brings in other cultures. Um, in the West, we're very familiar with a child's game called Snakes and Ladders. And you have these ladders that you go up, and the snakes bring you down again. Well, uh, the ladders represent virtue. You're going towards heaven, but that's what the original play game was all about. And the so you have the virtues. If you're virtuous, you ascend the ladder, and then the vices bring you down. They're the snakes. So humans are always struggling to be virtuous and ascend towards heaven, but something always brings them down. This is known as the ladder of divine ascent, and it there's a part missing from the story. In the ladder of divine ascent, it's a single ladder, and all the virtuous people are trying to climb up, and underneath you've got all these devils trying to pull them off. And this is a very old painting going back to something like the 1200s or 1300s. But what is missing from the story is that at the top of the ladder, there is Christ holding out his hand to pull the virtuous. I'm not quite sure what you would call them, but in the picture, they're monks, of course. So the virtuous monks gets pulled into heaven. We have the same ritual in Freemasonry. And
Oh,
in the book of Revelation, Christ is referred to as the lion's paw of the tribe of Judah. And that is uh, where Christ puts out his hand, which is the lion's paw. And this is also reflected in Freemasonry.
wow,
And
interesting.
in Freemasonry, the candidate represents somebody who has died, but he is raised using Christ's like hand shape, or what we call a grip. And but you have to think, the person's dead. What are you actually raising? Are you raising a carcass or a skeleton? No, you're raising the soul, the spirit out of the body. And now once you come out, you're immortal.
So, Chris, tell us a little bit more about immortality, but let's dive into the Taoistic perspective.
Yes. So the Taoist, the in Taoism, uh, people want to become immortal, and so their idea was of a person who could move between this world and the next world at ease. He could just leave his body, and when he's out of his body, then he could help with working in the spiritual world. And this isn't actually explained in depth in the Taoist. There's a sort of gap. But you'd say, well, what's the benefit of having an out of body experience? Well, first, the most thing is it automatically hits you that I'm immortal. I will never die. This is for many people an astounding truth because it's never talked about in church. You're going to go to heaven. Well, what does that mean? What is heaven? So we haven't been really taught about it. But if you read William Bullman's or Robert Peterson's books, you will understand these are people who are travelers in consciousness. They are all the time leaving their bodies and going to different places, and they realize that heaven's not a single place. We have a consciousness that uh, people's understandings create different heavens. So if you are, let's see, if you follow Islam, then you have a certain concept of what heaven looks like. A Christian heaven, again, is different. And and if you go into other cultures like Africa or whatever, and even people who are what we would look at as extremists, like terrorists, they have a concept of what heaven is, and using their thought, they're able to create that. They're not sitting down and trying to create it, but it's a kind of group consciousness that creates that, so that when they die, they their expectations are met. They go to the heaven that they are expecting. And so when you die, you just go to, I mean, for example, you would think like a park, and you're going to meet all your family, and all your pets are going to be there waiting for you. Um, and you're going to have a nice time and lots of tea parties, and you're going to study the Bible. Well, actually, it's not really like that. But I haven't been there, but people have, like William Bullman. So um, yes, it's not, heaven's not a one place thing. And then there's a gap between heaven and we call it in Tibet, they call it Bardo. The Catholics call it purgatory. They're trying to back away from that concept of purgatory at the present. I understand, but there is a gap that's recognized in Buddhism as well. You have to cross a river, and then heaven's on the other side. um, Many people have near death experiences, and they go close to the river. Some people see a river, other people just see a red road. Um, and so, depending on your experiences in this life, whether you go straight to heaven or if you spend time in purgatory, um, is up to how you live this life.
Interesting. So it sounds like you're saying that heaven and hell are a matter of perspective, dependent upon your early childhood beliefs.
Yes. So it's faith. You can't just uh, will yourself into heaven. So the interesting point, and it's a little difficult to understand, is who makes the decision what happens to you after after you die. That's very interesting. There isn't a single God per se sitting in judgment, but there is a collective understanding. There is some sort of organization or system, um, which includes angels. And I have had angelic experiences, so I totally believe it. I'm not a practicing Christian. I was brought up in the Christian as a child, but more I studied it, more I couldn't um, get, couldn't agree with going to church. But I do believe in it, and I've had angelic experiences which were mind mind blowing. Just doesn't explain. It doesn't do it justice. It was a really interesting experience. Yes.
I find that a lot of people who are brought up Christian in the faith it's not the faith itself that changes. It's the ideology behind the dogmatic practices that people tend to not be able to get behind.
Yes, so there are a lot of prejudice in Christianity, and they really have to get over this. Pope Pope John Paul II is trying to do, like they're talking about transsexual people and their rights within the church, and whether they can receive communion, etc. We should be past this. We were still this is like medieval thinking. It's this is not the religion for the 21st century. We've got to move on.
Right, for sure, I 100% agree. But one thing I really want to dive into is when we were talking in our other segment about Freemasonry and immortality, we mentioned the the lower energies or the demons want to pull your spirit or your body down and reaching up to Christ the Christos in order to reach the Godhead.
Yeah.
So when we transition that over to the ideas of Taoism and to the ideas of the East, will we be talking about things such as like the chakra energy centers? Will those demons be the lower chakras or the lower dantian? And then are we talking about moving up to the upper dantian?
Thing about the chakra is that it's an Indian system. Indian is a little bit a broad brush, because that in India, the subcontinent of India, has so many different groups within it, um, Hindus and Brahmins and other things. So the chakra is something the West learnt from them. It's part of the raising of the energy that the Chinese talk about, but the Chinese don't talk about it as chakras. I mean, when I say Chinese, I mean Taoist, sorry. And of course, Taoist, there are two major schools of Taoism. There's the Daojia, which is the Daojia means the house or the school of Tao, and it's a philosophical organization. That's the one I joined. They study the teachings of Mencius and Confucius. And then on the other side, there's the Dao Jiao. Dao Jiao is same spelling but with an O on the end, and that's the religion of Dao. And if you go to China or Hong Kong, you'll see these bright red temples, and often on the roofs they have dragons and lots of dragons attached to the roofs. The pictures of the gods all have bright red faces and tons of shaggy black hair. So that's the religious side. Um, but both schools are studying or have studied immortality. And so, yes, that's, I forgot what I was saying, but yes, sorry.
That was perfectly fine.
Oh, yes, sorry,
So
the chakras, yes. So in Taoism, they talk about the qi energy, and you have to raise the qi energy from your lower, they call tandian, which are, um, it's a energy centers, and there are three major energy centers. There are smaller ones, but the three major ones are Tandian, which is below your navel, your belly button, and then there's the solar plexus, and then there's the third eye, and you have to raise the energy from up the back through the third eye down the front, and then to the bottom, and just go around in a circle. And you use the way you move the energy is through breathing, deep breathing. So when you breathe in, you suck up this energy, you imagine it. Yeah, because first you have to use your imagination. And then when it gets to the top, you breathe out, and then the energy goes back down to underneath your navel. And after a while, when you actually do it, you can actually feel the energy moving up and down your hands. And your hands will start to get warm because the energy is circulating, and it's this energy that awakens uh, a a pearl inside of you, which then becomes a fetus, and then it leaves with a lot of practice, but it leaves through the top of the head. And again, this to bring into the masonry things. In Taoism, you have four gates on in your body. It's the top is called the south, Strange, there's a reason for that. And the anal area is called the north. The front is the east, and the back is the west. These are four gates. And in masonry, we have an imaginary temple with four gates: north, south, east, and west. But the north gate is closed. And same in Taoism, you have to keep your anal, because we only have so like five holes in our bodies: ears, nose, mouth, and your anus. The energy cannot leave through the bottom of your body. You have to keep circulating. If it escapes through, the energy escapes from the bottom, and that's mainly through sexual misuse, is how they explain it. Um, to being over I don't know what the phrase, the correct word would be, but perhaps indulging in too much sexual activity probably is one way of saying it. Promiscuity, the energy is lost, and then you will never become have enough energy to get your 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 pearl out of the top of your head, and that's how you escape into the universe.
So when you're talking about the seed or the germ or the pearl, the I've also heard that be referred to as the Christos oil and the crystal seed. In The Secret of the Golden Flower, they actually talk about a time period that's best for each individual to do that. And they talk about the ritual. It's very ritualistic, and it talks about when to do it, how to do it, and so on and so forth.
Yes, it's very
So
detailed.
yes, it is. It's very detailed. I
Yeah,
find it
I
very
mean,
fascinating.
and they break down the energy into male and female, and the female is negative, and the dragon, represented by a dragon, and the male is positive and represented by a tiger. Um, But oh, just something I was thinking about: the three gates. During the ritual in Freemasonry, um, a certain individual needs to leave the temple in a hurry, and he is um, attacked at one of the gates, at the south gate, and then he tries to leave by another gate, and the the mason who is guiding the candidate, because the candidate doesn't know what's going on, says, let's leave by the uh, another gate. And he particularly avoids the north gate. In fact, they're standing right next to the north gate, but the candidate says, you can't leave by the north gate, you have to leave by another gate. Well, you can't leave by another gate, because that's in Taoism, that gate is shut. You know, it has to be shut, otherwise you're losing your energy. And so this is again how Taoism and Freemasonry fit exactly.
So does that mean that the energy shouldn't uh, escape out of any other gate aside from the south gate?
No, you have to escape through the south from the top. And the whole idea why it's the south is because maps in China are written the other way round. Our maps in um, this, we're talking about ancient China, but so the north is the top of the map and the south is the bottom of the map. That's how we understand things. But if in China it's the other way around, the south is at the top of the map. And the reason for that is, if you're standing in China and looking towards the equator, well, you're looking towards the south. That's how you visualize things. So that's how you write the map. You write it looking the direction south there, and you're standing in the north because you're in China. So they write their maps. So the head is known as the south gate, and that's how they have to escape from the south gate. But in reality, my experiences and Bill Bullman's, the body doesn't escape from the top of the head at all. It just floats out.
You know, you talked a lot about your own experiences as far as dealing with angels and really with these practices. Are there any that you could share with us?
Are there any?
Any experiences dealing with angels and other entities that you can share with us?
Oh, yes. Well, yes. So I'm also a dowser, and dowsing is a very powerful tool if you um, learn to use it to the full extent. Many people use it simplistically for yes and no, but you can actually use it to direct energy. And again, it's all, as I mentioned previously, it's intention, your intention, and the pendulum or whatever you're using. The pendulum's just a tool, and it's easy to see what's going on, but you don't really need it. You can, with a bit of practice, you can talk to the spirit world and have your intention recognized in the spirit world. So I've worked for quite a long time in Japanese psychiatric ward, and many people there were possessed. And it was quite obvious to me. But the doctors don't recognize that as being a psychiatric ailment. And who was it? I forget. Some doctor. Ah, yes, yes. There's a really interesting book called 30 Years Among the Dead, um, by I forget, the name escapes me. It'll come back to me. Um, but he was a psychiatrist, and his wife was a medium, and he was healing people on a regular basis who were possessed but didn't know it, and they were having mental issues. They were Some people were hearing voices, other people were getting very bad headaches, etc. Some people were feeling suicidal, and he was able to get rid of all these issues just by um, exercising them. Well, I do quite a lot of that for my friends, people who ask me. I do it quite a lot.
Interesting. What's the difference between an individual who might have a psychiatric issue that hears voices and another individual who may hear angels and talk to spirit guides?
So people who hear spirit guides and angels are mediums. People, and they just have a normal life because the spirit guides and angels are there just to support the person. They don't annoy the person. They don't shout at the person. They don't call them names. They're not berated or told to do stupid things like jump in front of a train, you know. And so you often see people walking on the street talking to themselves. Well, they're not talking to themselves. They're talking to the entity that is in their aura, that's in their also in their ear, and saying, you're a useless person. One of the reasons that so this is a long story, but the spirit world is divided into angels and fallen angels. But fallen angels is just a level of negativity. People who had really bad lives in their past lives and done bad things aren't able to enter heaven, and they're in this bardo area, and they attach themselves to the living because either they want to re-experience life, or one of the reasons that people who abuse alcohol, the reason they can't stop abusing alcohol, is because there is some entity in their aura who loves that energy, that rush when you have a beer. The first beer you get, it feels great. The first beer, the second beer, third is not the same, but the first beer, and this entity loves that energy, and is always pushing the man with comments, "Oh, just another one," and the man just "Oh, I'll have another one," and he can't break this cycle of being addicted to alcohol because there's an entity inside him driving him.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter what you can go to as many, uh, is it Betty Davis centers? I forget what they call them. Um, it won't help because that entity is still there, and 6 months later or a year later, the person will start drinking again. It's very difficult to break. So these entities are in um, in our lives. It's part of our reality, but the church teaches it in such a bad way that we're not able to handle negative energy. We can call upon angels for help, but we don't know how to do it properly. We don't even know that it's possible.
Mm.
We've lost so much in life. So the Taoist teachings kind of make you into this immortal, and you can take on the negativity directly. You don't have You will be in the spirit world with and you go to these spirits and get the hell out of this person, leave him alone, and you can do an exorcism just like that because love and the power of angels is so much stronger than the negative energy. It just has to be directed. But because humans have free will, angels cannot just step in and exercise negativity from a sick person. They have to be asked. And that is really important that we have free will. Otherwise, we just end up as puppets of the spirit world. We're not. We are, in fact, we're probably many degrees stronger than the spirit world because we have free will. But we don't know that. Nobody teaches us this. It's a real shame.
Interesting. So you're talking about it from a Taoistic perspective, but does some of this cross into Freemasonry? Like in Freemasonry, do they talk about the spirit world and the entities and how to deal with them?
No, no, we don't talk about that at all. It's all left up to your own. And in fact, what I'm talking about now isn't in my books. That's further down the road, um, because yes, I think I've helped some people just using sitting where I am in Japan. I've helped people in America and in England just with my pendulum. I can change their lives, and it's a humbling feeling. It's not a feeling of power or being awesome or wonderful. It's humbling that through this network of spiritual entities, which I'd never seen them, but I know they're there. When they come into my room, the whole atmosphere changes. It's indescribable. And so yeah, I find it very. I'm addicted to it. I'm addicted to energy and helping people, and this I call the world wonderful. We live in a wonderful world because the world is full of wonder. And there's so much that we don't understand that we should understand that nobody teaches us, and there's so much garbage and nonsense out there, whereas the truth is so simple. It's really simple. It goes back to the Taoist yin yang sign, black and white. You've got the power, the white, which we've mentioned being a positive energy, but it's love, isn't it? It's love, this positive energy. It's the angels, and the black is all the negative, all the stupid shits that are still alive, they're still affecting people. And yes, it's a very interesting experience. Yeah, perhaps I
Wow.
should be a priest.
I feel like we should all, do a little research on energy and some of the upper dimensional beings, angels, spirit guides, and
Yes,
really get in tune.
yes.
And I really feel that everybody should read The Secrets of the Golden Flower. Honestly, it's one of the most transformative books that I've ever read.
The Secret of the Golden Flower is interesting, but I recommend another book which is called Taoist Yoga. Taoist yoga is the same as the golden flower, but it's been written by an adept, somebody who is experienced in this, and he's written it much more simply, so it's easier to understand.
Oh,
But
interesting. I have to read that
but
one next, actually.
yeah, yeah.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. Is there anything you want to leave with the audience before we go?
Can I plug my book?
Yes, 100%.
This is my book. What is this? Freemasonry Royal Arch. This explains the Taoist um, ritual of how to leave the body and everything. It talks about how religion in England went from being a duality to a Trinitarianism, and for example, in Catholicism, um, many saints were able to levitate. Their whole body just lifted up into the church, into the ceiling. And people think, well, that can't happen, with our present understanding. But for example, Joseph of Cupertino, I think it is, um, uh, when he levitated in front of a crowd of people, the Pope was there, Pope Urban the Eighth, I think it was, and so they had to canonize him because they couldn't understand it. They thought that angels were pulling him up. um, Teresa of Avila. she would pray and she would just float up, and all the sisters in the church had to pull her legs to pull her down again. There are many, and they're all explained in my book. So if people can levitate, so why can't the soul just levitate, leave the body? It's just it's to me it seems obvious, but there's so much superstition and misunderstanding that unfortunately we are trapped in the material world, and the spiritual world is side by side. It's just waiting for us to call upon it, to work with it, and I would recommend everyone study dowsing because it's such a simple process, and it enables you to connect with spiritual world directly, like a telephone.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah. Before we go, I do have one more question. Why do you think that the psychic abilities and really getting in touch yourself with the spirit world is so demonized in religion?
I think it's fear. 'Cause there's nothing else. It's either love or fear, and, so people are afraid of what they don't know or don't understand, and, psychic abilities are in the spiritual world, they say it's a kind of illusion or diversion, and, being able to move things with your hands, or, uh like Nostradamus, you're able to see the future. That's only just a part of the all the psychic abilities that are out there. But the most advanced is the out of body experience.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting, interesting. Well, I want to thank you so much, Mr. Chris, for coming on and really laying out the differences and similarities between Freemasonry and Taoism. And one more time, what was that book you said that we should all check out?
Well, there's probably 50 books. I'd like you to check my book. The first one is called this. I've written several, but the first one is called Freemasonry Initiation by Light, which we talked about previously, how the master brings the light from the east. And then the third degree is explained in great detail, and how you can have an out of body experience in Freemasonry Royal Arch. Other books I would recommend. Well, I just um, let me think. 30 Years Among the Dead is available as an ebook for like $2 because it was written in the 1920s. The English is a little bit old, but 1920s English is different from modern English. But what he's talking about and the experiences there, I mean, you sometimes have to put the book down and go for a walk.
I read plenty of books that have me putting it down and walking away, really having to internalize what I just read.
Yeah, and yeah, there's just you say, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of aha
yeah.
moments.
It's not a quick read. It's a simple book, but it makes you think, and you just have to stop. If you're a thinking person, yes, you will want to. But oh, there are many great books out there. Yes. Also, I have a podcast like yourself, and I talk about Freemasonry and the spiritual practice as well.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Onion Soup, and I truly hope that you guys enjoyed it. And please go check out these books and increase your own knowledge about spirituality, energy, and the afterlife. Have a great one, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks, Dexter.